Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain. So,
It's a beautiful Wednesday morning from here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Okikelu.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Oh, yes. So there was that waiting period, right?
Yeah.
For the vaccines to hit Kogi states. That period where people were thinking, will it happen? Will it not? Well, it seems to have happened, right? It has happened. Let me just say that. And I think the smile on our faces is probably as a result of the twists, the turns in this journey to this point right now. You recall that Kogi State is still, in some sense, one of those states where you have the governor with a lot of skepticism when it comes to COVID-19. In fact, he was on record speaking about the vaccine, saying they want to use the vaccine to introduce something that will kill us. God forbid. He said that in front of a lot of people. His deputy was there. So it's kind of a relief for especially healthcare workers and frontline workers, seeing that Kogi State has received the first batch of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Because, well, the governor might not agree with COVID-19 and the vaccines. He might have his reservations. Yes, that's where he was speaking about his reservations for the vaccine. But that's the governor. Maybe his deputy aligns with him. That's his deputy. Maybe members of a cabinet align with him. That is for them. But what about the healthcare workers who say, well, we have to face patients on a daily basis. We need some form of protection. Is he also speaking for them? Well, clearly now with the reception of those vaccines, it would seem that they now have freedom to get the vaccine. Now you can see the Commissioner for Health smiling there. And I mean, the head of the MPHCDA in this state was saying, well, even the press had to say, finally, the vaccines arrive in Kogi State because it's been a long time coming. And I think it goes to show the role of leaders. I mean, don't forget they said that strategic leaders will take the vaccines. We don't know if the governor of Kogi State will take that. But it speaks to the role of leaders in setting the tone for the fight against COVID-19.
I think, generally, the central attention should always be on the people. Of course, governments at various levels, the relevant agencies of government have been saying even that despite the very, very low figures of COVID-19 cases in Kogi, it's because there haven't been enough testings and all of that. And then when you look at states that surround Kogi, with the numbers of cases that they have and the fact that they have borders, and there have been influx of issues from one state to the other, it's no gainsaying that there could have been issues of COVID-19 cases in Kogi as well. But according to the NCDC, since we don't have enough testings, maybe we will not be able to know these things. Central to all these issues that we're raising is the people. And with the examples that are being shown, flagging off some strategic leaders in the state taking the vaccine, one can only hope maybe this is a foot forward and hope that indeed, the needful needs to be done. Look, the vaccine hesitancy is not new. It's a global phenomenon. In fact, there is a presidential an ex-president, the family of an ex-president in the U.S. who is said to lead the charge as far as COVID-19 of vaccine hesitancy generally is concerned. So it's not a new thing. But what role governments at various levels have to play is educating people. So whether or not we're doing that significantly well. Even that is not a new thing. But then don't forget what we always say about messaging.
yeah.
If we are able to message it right and keep at it, hopefully people will get it eventually.
Oh, yeah, consistency is key in a lot of these things, guys. And, these experimental vaccines, because that's what it is, and that debate it made the rounds, actually. In fact, people are not exactly sure now if countries will make vaccine passports compulsory. Some airlines are having that conversation. Nigeria had that kind of conversation, but a good thing that even UNESCO has said, UN has said, look, they don't have enough data for us to say, look, this vaccine actually does prevent the spread of it, because there's been several reports. I mean, we all know about the blood clots deaths in different parts of the country and different things like that. But over here, is something we need to look at, because we also did say, look, we don't even have enough of those vaccines. We don't manufacture them. So on what grounds are we going to be relying on saying, look, everybody must be compulsorily vaccinated, since vaccine hesitancy is not new? And it would be a good thing for us to come back home here, because that's most important, I dare say, that, excuse me, beyond all of these that has happened, our health sector, what are we doing to ramp it up? It's huge. The impact that is having in the country, look, maybe you haven't felt it, but if you feel it, you will know it.
Sincerely.
It is huge. What are we doing about raising the capacity of our health sector so that we can stop medical tourism? Those are very important things that we need to, because we can't keep doing the same things and expect different results, increasing budgetary allocations, and then nothing to show for it back home. Health professionals live in the country in droves. And then the strike.
Oh yeah, the ones that don't leave are on strike right now. And I tell you, if you visit, some of these hospitals, state hospitals, federal hospitals, I mean, even if you have an emergency, it has to be something monumental for you to be attended to.
Even if it's monumental in many cases, they still don't attend to you.
Because of the strike, most people have been turned back. Take Lasut, for example. You know how many people throng into Lasut on a daily basis just to see doctors, and now they're being turned back. And that is something happening across all states in the country as we speak.
I don't even think we understand the enormity of what we're talking about. I don't think, we had that, I think it was the enemy president who was saying, it's only we, Channel Television, that take these things seriously. It is sad and painful. I don't think the enormity of what is at stake has dawned on the relevant, officials, because it's only those who feel it that know it. It's those who feel it that know it. There are, with the figures, with the poverty figures, with the unemployment figures, with the hunger figures, and all of those things, how many people can afford to go to private hospitals? These are the only places that people can go to. Primary healthcare centers, secondary healthcare centers. These are the only places that these people can go. And this is the kind of challenge so the issue that you have just raised, Chamberlain, about the challenges of the health sector in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin. So the appeal, again, is going out to government on this matter. Look, let us give due attention, because we really don't know who is going to be affected.
Well, at some point in the program, we're going to focus on that. So we'll just keep harping on that as much as we can. It's all for the good of society.
Sincerely.
And ensure that things go well. Because if we don't have... Look, it's a system. And system is a system.
Run by people.
Yeah, and look, let's just go right into the dailies and take a look at what they reflect today. Oh boy. Maybe nothing for you to smile about, really. Take a look at Vanguard. Anarchy worsens in Imo. Another police station burnt. So there you go. Detainees freed. 3 police vehicles burnt. There's no hiding place for IPOB members, says immediate past IGP. Things happen so quick. Quick. He was on tour.
Oh yes, he was. I mean, that just shows how transient power is, and I think that's the message for a lot of people. I mean, he was right there on an official assignment when the announcement came through. But well, I'm sure the other dailies will reflect some of that.
Hoodlums are cowards. Resist them. Oshibajo advises Imolites. Masob accuses FG of sponsoring attacks in Southeast. 1 killed, 36 vehicles burnt, 68 detainees escaped. Imo CP. Attack plot to destabilize Southeast. Huriwa. FG to pardon escaped inmates who return voluntarily. Aregbeshala.
That's an interesting one.
Defend yourselves, Uzodinma tells policemen. So, yeah, the whole thing appears interesting anyway. So, all of this. So, wait, if you return voluntarily, you're pardoned.
Well, yeah.
And so, if you return voluntarily, you go home.
Let's see how that works.
Okay, well, You may want to read it and see and understand these things and see. But unfortunately, you also see another kind of story like that here. Family of 5 killed in Ondo, 2 Chinese in Osun. Kidnappers demand 10 million naira ransom. Suspected herdsman attacked 3 women in Ikiti. It just appears as though it's free for all. When you see these kind of things, this people think it's because look, they do these things because they've done it before. They think they can get away with it. That's why they do it. And there you go. But are they getting away with it? I think the figures will tell you if you go through it and take a look at them yourselves. Take a look at what's on the back page. 8-month pregnant Lagos athlete wins gold, silver, bronze. Whoa.
That's amazing. That's huge, really. I mean, 8-month-old, pregnant rather. I imagine the baby's coming out as an athlete. But that's a beautiful one, really.
Well, I'd like you to take a look at Mr. and Mrs. It's
due to popular demand, right?
Yes.
Well, they need to take a look at it. It's got to do with
Something.
something you need to take a look at. That's Vanguard this morning.
Well, take a look at the Nigerian Tribune's front page. The lead story, Adamu's journey cut short. Baba, 58, named new IGP. That's how the Nigerian Tribune leads this morning. And you see a profile of the acting IGP's, his profile, I should say, born 1963, March the 1st in Yobe State, enlisted in 1988. There's been some chatter about just how many years or how much more he has to spend in service. But you have that profile right there on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. And so on top of the nameplate, this debate is never ending, really. So let me just give a point to one side of that debate. You see, females performed better in 2021 WAS. That's on page 8. So 1 point for the females. So you can use this in your next debates in your school. Who is more brilliant?
You mean the Literary and Debating Society?
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder why those topics were thin anyway. Who is a better teacher or a doctor? Who was
at the level of your mental expectation?
It helps you to think deeply, really. But it's quite interesting right there. I see IMF forecasts 2.5% economic growth for Nigeria in 2021, and some are saying we might even do better, judging from previous forecasts and how Nigeria did. But
if we improve security or what?
Well, maybe some of the factors. But, some will tell you 2.5%, 3% is not really where we ought to be. We ought to be at maybe double digits, for example.
We've been battling, trying to get those inflation figures to single digit for years. 20 years, or decades.
Oh, dear. A big one. Well, you see, Nigerian Tribune Sport also has that 8-month pregnant athlete wins first gold for Lagos.
I don't understand how it works. Did they actually clear her to participate? 8 months pregnant?
Hey, I don't know if there's a rule against having a pregnant woman participate.
The question is, what game?
It's taekwondo, for crying out loud.
I don't know, but I choose to see this as a positive, really.
Really? Taekwondo?
I think it's a win for Preggies this morning. I mean, take some inspiration from a fellow Preggie.
Look, I think just look at that in light of what we currently do have. You know that the doctors are on strike. You know you don't have a fantastic health sector. You know if you've got an emergency, you have to be careful.
Oh, dear.
So in the light of all of those things, and if you have to clear this, I don't know.
Well, I hear that's how they roll. So
we have to be realistic with what's going on. So I don't understand this.
Okay, different strokes. Let us know what you think about that, really. 8-month pregnant woman winning gold.
I won't allow, left to me, no. It's a no. I won't let that happen.
It's passion.
Yeah.
Very
there can be passion. Passion will still be there after you give birth. You still have passion to go back to it after you train. Come on, we'll watch international athletes globally. We'll see what happens.
I think we'll get to even speak with her, hopefully, and find out, what motivated you. But for me, I think it's a good one.
Okay.
For me, I stand in the middle. The Guardian newspaper this morning is talking about the incidents in Imo. Again, Gunmen raise police station after VP sacked IGP visited. Beg your pardon. Let me check that again. Again, gunmen raised police station after VP sacked IGP visited Imo.
The power of punctuations.
After VP and sacked IGP visited Imo. Interesting.
Okay.
Buhari appoints Usman Baba acting IGP from UK. While President terminated Adamu's 3-month tenure extension, shocked ex-IGP charges cops to be ruthless with IPOB. Buhari making things difficult for Ndigbo, says Ohaneze. That story continues on page 2. We've talked a little about this earlier. Right beside the picture you see there, World Health Day. FG states tasked to address inequality and access to coverage. How to build fairer, healthier Nigeria by experts. Blame doctors' strike on government's insincerity to welfare of health care workers. So World Health Day is happening when doctors are on strike.
How ironic, right?
Very interesting. Let me just leave it there. So many other issues. That will take your attention on the front page of the Guardian newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at blueprints. That's the next one we've got for you here and see what they lead with. CJN to Jusun. Why I can't persuade governors on financial autonomy. Strike cripples court activities nationwide. Governors must implement Executive Order 10. Judicial workers. ASUP explains polytechnics shut down. So there you go again. It's that series of strikes. Yes, you got Jusun. ASUP also began theirs. NARD also on their part. And then...
So it's now education, health, and judiciary.
And don't forget, ASU is also threatening to go on strike.
Yeah.
So the question is, who's not on strike?
We.
Okay, fantastic.
You see this one over here. IMF projects 6% growth for global economy in 2021, 2.4% for Nigeria. Hopefully they should materialize to what now? Reflect. You know how they say, looking beyond those figures and see how it does reflect on people's economy, people's pocket, basically.
Okay, take a look at Daily Trust newspaper. It leads with, after Daily Trust's story, Buhari fires IGP Adamu over poor management. The Daily Trust, we'll get to the Daily Times in a moment. Buhari fires IGP Adamu over poor management, escalating insecurity. Lawyers plan fresh suit. On what exactly? Find more details. You see, ex-AIG set agenda for new IGP. President can hire and fire. Who said that? Well, more details again.
Remind me of literature. Who said that? To whom was it said?
And you see, meet new police helmsman. So you find all of that in the inside pages of the Daily Trust. Now you see the 2 pictures on the front page. On top of...
Well, clearly the outgone IGP didn't know he was going to go. Because if he knew, why would he be on tour?
I mean, you're meant to serve till the last minute. So why... I mean, as they say, governance is up until the last minute. So why sit back and not do anything just because you know you're leaving? I think that's the opinion for me. But yeah,
maybe we should try that to that footballer that was substituted when he just scored the goal and then he was just mad at the coach. So what? From my 2 goals, you didn't have a hat trick.
Well, for the Daily Trust, it seems that there were a lot of challenges. Not much goals were being scored. So, well, you see, right into that, World Health Day, WHO makes case for fairer, healthier post-COVID-19 world. Yeah, and I'm sure somehow that
does that
strike
include
will
our
come
world?
in. I guess so. I mean, we're part of the world, aren't we?
Yeah, it's the same world, really.
Is it?
It's the same world. Just depends on what part of the world.
It's the same world. Wow, aren't people living in droves, the medical people to other worlds?
Because the world is connected.
Yes, exactly. So Nigerians haven't really left. They just always have telemedicine.
Nigerians haven't really left.
It's telemedicine, you know.
Oh, okay.
Nigerian News Direct is next, and it leads with why Buhari removed IGP Adamu, ascribed to the minister, appoints Baba as acting IGP. That's the lead of the Nigerian News Direct. this morning. And you can check the details on page 3 of the paper today. NAFDAC warns Nigerians against Mexico-manufactured hand sanitizers.
Any word on the vaccines? What the research has found?
Not that one. It's not there right now.
Well, I thought the talk was, I mean, the benefits far outweigh the risks. That's what the NAFDAC has said time
Hand
and again.
sanitizers, guys.
No, for the vaccine.
Okay. No,
Yeah,
this is
but
about
they were
hand
still going
sanitizers.
to, it didn't mean they were going to abandon the pharmacovigilance that they had spoken about
certainly
at the time.
not.
So research is still on. It's an ongoing concern.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So
Definitely not something to abandon just like that.
yeah, so take a look at Daily Times next. Baba replaces Adamu as acting IGP. That's the big lead right there on the front page of the Daily Times, which you've seen some other dailies highlight as well. But now the question will be, how does that, what is he going to bring to the table? How will they affect all this call about under policing and security challenges we've got across the country?
Those security challenges are not just things to wish away. Some of the things that a number of people that we have hosted have said point to the role that politicians are playing in security or a lack of it. Policies that are making people creating idle minds, so to speak.
Yeah, but above all, there's a structural challenge. Look through every state and tell me one state that doesn't have another form of policing other than the Nigeria Police Force, the NPF.
That always has been. Sadly so, but that always has been.
More so now than before.
Exactly.
Did we have Motekun before?
No.
Did we have LASMA before? Did we several other, one form or the other? Those are several forms of policing. But the country will never have that conversation about reorganization of the police. Whatever nomenclature you want to call it.
The country...
Just going through the things from the back
The
door.
country will have that conversation. It's just a matter of time, Chamberlain. Country has to have that conversation.
That's what you think. It's only you that thinks.
Chamberlain.
Like the enemy president said. It's only you that sees that critical.
The country has
I didn't even link that right now.
No, seriously. The country has to
But
have
it
that
sounds
conversation.
critical.
See, we had the conversation in 2005 at the Constitutional Conference. We had the conversation in 2014 at that Constitutional Conference as well. And those recommendations are still out there. It's only a matter of time.
Well, the National Assembly is also going through that constitutional review process. So
For
definitely
the
that's-
umpteenth time.
So that's one of the major issues on the table.
It's always been. It was the last time when he fell through.
It won't
it didn't
end.
happen.
Ultimately, and just as we always advocate here, it's always about the people. So let the people who are in government now know that your days are count. Your days
textbook politics, isn't
absolutely.
it? Government
It's
of people, for the people, by the people.
not just that,
nice.
it's actually the way it is. And
Is
for
it?
God's sake, all the conversations that we're having, who is even talking about the local governments anymore? You remember that talk that someone said that they're trying to delist
There's an election coming up in some states for local government elections.
while the National Assembly is thinking about...
Oh, yeah. They could think all they want.
I mean, there are still reservations about
It's a
those
free
elections.
country. People can think.
Are those really
Think?
elections or
Yeah,
selections?
free thinkers.
The local government elections. I mean, we have to be honest. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. But don't forget, you missed that story right under the big picture. NNPC firm signs $1.5 billion Port Harcourt refinery rehabilitation contract. So yes, that's going.
Oh, yeah, they did. So in spite of all the talk and the thinking.
I wish them the very best.
All right, so there you go. That is it. We'll look at some of the dailies here this morning. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Yes, indeed, that is what we're focusing on this morning. We've got Mr. Ebonlu Adegborowa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, it does appear as if it's a critical time now, almost in different sectors of the country, economy, extension. Judiciary workers, now they've down tools, and that is definitely going to affect the system in spite of all the appeals. Well, I haven't seen the way this is playing out. Was this something you saw coming, or perhaps given those interventions, you might have thought, okay, well, maybe there just might be a way out without them having to go on strike?
Thank you very much. Good morning. I believe that
the general thinking in Nigeria is that the best language that the executive understands is a kind of force and by way of strike action. You recall now that virtually all sectors of this country is on strike. Doctors are on strike. Lecturers are on strike. Electricity workers have been on strike. National Assembly workers have been on strike. So even at a particular time, security agencies, police force, policemen went on strike. In this particular case, a notice had been issued by members of the Judicial Workers' Staff Union of Nigeria since March 13, which I believe was sufficient time for government to embark upon dialogue and negotiations towards ensuring the implementation of the Constitution. And why do I say this? You know, we don't need this strike at all, because the law is very clear that Nigeria shall be run as a federation. And that federation consists mainly 3 tiers of government in Section 4, establishing the legislature, Section 5, establishing the executive, and Section 6, establishing the judiciary. These 3 organs of government are supposed to be separate and interrelated, operating the theory of separation of powers and checks and balances to ensure independence and autonomy for the arms. Presently, the executive is the only arm of government that is independent because, as you well know, the executive is in charge of appropriation and revenue. But, of course, during the last National Assembly, they fought that battle and they were able to also gain their own independence to the extent that they now have a National Assembly Commission and they are in charge of their own funds. So we are left with the judiciary. And I think it's important to understand what we mean by agitating for legislative, judicial autonomy. The Constitution provides clearly that Nigeria will have what we call Consolidated Revenue Fund in Section 80, 81 to 84 for the Federation. Now, you can take money from that Consolidated Revenue Fund only in 2 ways. The money that is charged as first line on that fund, you can take it directly from that Consolidated Revenue Fund. Secondly, money that is appropriated as contained in a budget estimate by the executive. Once it's approved by the legislature, you can take money from there. Now, if you look at our experience, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, the legislature, National Assembly and the state assemblies of the states, and the judiciary, their fund and revenue are on the first line charge of the Revenue Consolidated Fund. In other words, they don't need to go through appropriation in order to ensure their independence. So you see that in this last year or so, the chairman of INEC took the budget of INEC directly to the National Assembly for approval. He didn't have to go to the president. He didn't have to go to the Minister of Finance, because you have to ensure the independence of INEC, being the body conducting an election. You can imagine the chairman of INEC going to meet president to get money. That will compromise him. So it's in that same spirit that it's expected that the judiciary will take its own budget directly to the assembly for approval.
Is this a brainer? Why is it an issue?
It's an issue because, you know, from our experience, the executive is unwilling to allow the judiciary to become independent. And I will explain the reasons why. You know, when you talk about implementing decisions of the judiciary, it affects mostly the executive, because the executive is in charge of executing and implementing policies, taking people's land. For instance, the police is a branch of the executive, arresting and locking people up. And these are things that go to the regular courts for implementation. And so if the judiciary is independent, it becomes a check on the excesses and impunity of the executive. That's why you see that it's difficult for the executive to allow the judiciary have its own autonomy in order to continue to reign in impunity and breach of the law in most cases. So that's why we've had this challenge, because the executive is unwilling to follow due process.
Stopped the courts from making
from pronouncing judgments. If you look back, even down through our history, even during military eras, the judiciary was always standing. Well, maybe not completely independent, but they were always standing. And then we didn't have a National Assembly most of the time during any military interregnum. But it's been 20 years, going to 21 years into this Fourth Republic. And I believe that some of the people, if not most of the people who are in government today, fought to be in this, for a Fourth Republic, for democracy to return. Now democracy has returned. What could be holding them back, the politicians now, whether they're in the executive or in the legislature, from doing what needs to be done? It's the Constitution. It's the grundam of the country.
Well, as you can see, if you follow the trend, the judiciary has been complaining that once they have to go cap in hand to beg for fund, it constitutes a limitation on independence and autonomy. And I'll just give you an instance. It was said of a particular chief judge of a state who had a case in her court relating to an action of the state of that particular state of the federation. And one day she went to see the governor to be able to get approval for certain items and request approval for funding. And jokingly, the governor said, my lord, we understand that you're about to give judgment against us, And so you see what that means for an institution that is supposed to be the last hope of the common man. If you have a case before a judge against a governor, for instance, and that judge has to go and beg the governor for funds to pay salaries, it will surely affect her mentality. In going to that same governor when you know you have a case to decide against the governor. And it was a shock to us when we got to the NBA conference 2 years ago, and we were debating this issue on the consequence of withholding autonomy for the judiciary. And some lawyers say that, look, just like you said, judges are always free to take decisions and that there's nobody holding them. The chief judge of Edo State, I believe she's now retired, came out during that conference and said, look, it is not so. He who pays the piper dictates the tune. And she said openly that judges are not able to exercise their free will if they know that they have some hindrance in getting their funds from the executive. And I think the President CJN said it on the day we were conferred with award of senior advocate at the Supreme Court, that the issue of checks and balances in the Constitution is not being achieved because there's a limitation to the autonomy for funding for the judiciary. So I think that this matter should be settled because a judgment has been delivered in the case of Agbakoba in 2014. Another judgment has been delivered in the case of judicial workers, mandating both the federal and state executive to release the money for the judiciary. And I must state here that I commend President Buhari unusually for his bold initiative towards achieving this autonomy.
If I could follow up on that, because when you say the executive is unwilling, but he then signed the Executive Order 10. So isn't that demonstration of intent that, look, we're willing to change these things? So it's now up to the state executives to actualize this.
I think the point we should make is that, there are divided opinion on the constitutional power of the president to sign Executive Order 10 in relation to funding, especially for the state houses of assembly and the judiciary. I believe, with all due respect, that when you read section 80, 81, and in particular 84 of the Constitution, it becomes clear that we don't need Executive Order 10. What the president has done, which we must commend him for, is to sign into law the fourth alteration, which amended section 121 sub 3 of the Constitution. And the president amended it, assigned to that bill that was passed by the last National Assembly to say the money that is meant for the heads of agencies mentioned in section 121, especially the judiciary, should be paid directly to an account nominated by the head of those courts. If that is a law in Nigeria, and the fourth rotation is already a law in this country, we don't need any Executive Order 10. It's for us to appeal to the governors, especially to be able to have the courage to allow democracy to work. so that the judiciary will have control of their own fund. The only thing that will be subject of appropriation will be capital projects. You want to build a court. But to buy cars for judges and then line the cars up and then call judges and be handing over keys to them in a democracy, it's not supposed to be so. It's not supposed to be so. The salary of a judge is supposed to be assured. It's not supposed to be altered. It's not supposed to be at the whims and caprice of the executive, because the Constitution is clear that he must be on the first line charge of the Consolidated Revenue Fund. That budget should be under the control of the judiciary.
Okay, let's take this to Mr. Kehinde Sobowale, who's the chairman, Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, Lagos branch. He also joins us here in Lagos. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I know you've been following the conversation, and you're at the forefront of this fight to ensure financial autonomy, in fact, autonomy generally for the judiciary. So, Mr. Adegborua is of the opinion that, you know what, the executive has been unwilling, and we've tried to find out, is it at the federal level, at the states level? But as a starter for you, really, having followed this conversation in light of what you're fighting for, what message are you trying to pass across to the government? Mr. Sobowale, I believe you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Well, I can't hear you again.
Okay. Well, I can hear you. If you can hear me, you could just go ahead with your response. Okay, let me just take the question again. But first, can you hear me? Okay, we'll work on that. But let me come back to Mr. Adegborua. Trying to understand who, should I say, the villain is here, because it's quite tricky, but we need to identify where the challenge is. The president has signed the executive order. In fact, the order mandates the Accountant General of the Federation to deduct from source the amount due to state legislatures who, fail to, abide by that provision of the Constitution. So is it at the federal, at the state, or both of them share this culpability in some sense?
I think generally we must compartmentalize the level of breach of the Constitution between the federal and the state governments. Like I said earlier, it's a commendable act on the part of the president and the last National Assembly for passing the fourth alteration amendment of the Constitution by giving directive that money be paid directly to the accounts of those agencies. But I think the federal government itself is still in breach, because in the last experience when the president approached the National Assembly, the budget of the judiciary was still within the appropriation bill which was surrendered to the National Assembly. And this ought not to be so. So to that extent, you will see that in the federal courts, Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, the Federal High Court, National Industrial Court, there is some level of autonomy in terms of their finances, in terms of the control by the heads of those courts, of the salaries in particular, and the remunerations and other things that require financial autonomy. But the problem mainly is within the states. And this is why I lay it at the feet of the governors, that we need to appeal to them. And that's what has led to this strike. The governors do not agree that the chief judge of the various states should have control of their funds. And they are not agreeing because it's a means of controlling the executive. It's a means of more or less exercising some kind of influence upon the activities of the judiciary, which is not acceptable to us. So to that extent, I believe JUSUN should have some kind of discretion in the way this particular strike is implemented. Because as of today, I verily believe that the federal courts are enjoying some level of autonomy in terms of their finances. The battle should go to the doorposts of the governors of the various states, because those are the areas where we have challenges, where the chief judges of those states are not allowed direct control of their funding.
Well, speaking of JUSUN, let's try Mr. Sobowale again and ask if this is the game plan of JUSUN in trying to achieve autonomy. Well, Mr. Sobowale, if you can hear me, please go ahead.
I can hear you. For us in JUSUN, we felt that it is time it is time for the judiciary to move forward. Now, this battle has been with JUSON for a very long time. If you remember, we went on strike in 2014 for the same cause. If you also remember, we went to court. We have a court judgment, and the court judgment was sacrosanct. This thing is easy. I don't know why the government does not want the judiciary to be free. Now, for us in JUSON at the national level, we felt that an independent judiciary is the best place for us to work, is the best place for us to give our best, is the best place for us to make sure that the court still remains the last hope of the common man. Now, for us, this strike is our last resort. I was at the last neck, and all avenue, all effort has been made, and it seems the government is so adamant in allowing judiciary to be free for whatever reason best known to them. But for us in JUSON, we felt this is the time for us to do this thing, and this is a time for us to make sure that the judiciary is totally independent. Thank you.
So, leaning on that expression, he who pays the piper dictates the tune, for me, I imagine that speaks a lot about the kind of influence that the executive will have on the judiciary. So if you could tell us, to what extent really is that influence? Because we could look at judgments and start casting them in the light of, so maybe, just maybe, the executive had a hand in this judgment. Is it really that bad?
For us, for us in Lagos State, let me say this. For us in Lagos State, I don't think the government has hand in any judgment that has ever come out of Lagos State. Because I know that the judges in Lagos State has this, what we call integrity. It's a superb integrity. And they avoid so much influence that has to come from the government. But you see, at times, when he will pay the piper, you know what it does. If my CJ has to go cap in hand to the government, to the governor every time for approval to do even the simplest thing as staff allowances, even the simplest thing as utility vehicle for the judiciary, then you should know how it's going to be a little bit difficult for the running of the judiciary, for the smooth running of the judiciary. But for me, from my own perspective, I don't think the government has any hand in or any influence in any judgment that has come out of judiciary.
Well, you know that the NBA did appeal to JUSON to shelve the strike, saying the timing was wrong. Even the CJN also waded in. So it appears those fell on deaf ears. Why was that?
Can you take the question again, please?
The NBA appealed to JUSON to shelve the strike in the interest of public and that the timing was wrong. But JUSON did adhere to that. Why?
The timing, the NBA is saying something about timing. For us in JUSON, which time is right? Timing of going to strike. Well, I felt the NBA should even be at the forefront of this fight because we have the bar, we have the bench. We, the staff of judiciary, are just the middle carrier, the carrier of justice. We implement whatever they spit out. We are in the middle of the bar and the bench. And I feel the bar, especially the NBA, should be at the forefront of this fight. So telling us that the timing is wrong or the timing is not right is not tenable. Now, the CGN, I sympathize with the CGN, but I know that my national leader in Abuja, the NEC, I'm sure they are in good consultation with the CGN, and I'm sure decision will be made soon. But for us in Lagos State, we are following the national strike that close all gates to the court, all gates to the court will be closed.
Yeah, but Mr. Deborah, could you help us shed light on that? I mean, what's the NBA? Because he said we thought they're supposed to be on the same page, even the CJN. What's going on?
Very much. This particular strike of judiciary workers is actually on behalf of lawyers and judges and on behalf of Nigeria. Because, and I say this with all due respect, when you look at the function of the judiciary to the existence of this country, right from the creation of Nigeria, the judiciary has been the only arm of government that is not subject to change. The military will come, sack civilian government. The judiciary has been the only chain of continuity. And that's why you have not seen any military government that has come to sack the entire courts. And so to that extent, you shouldn't allow such body to become starved of funds to the extent that when you go to some courts today, you cannot even sit down. If you go to Ikoyi and check the Federal High Court in Lagos, it's been under construction maybe for the past 10 years on body loan. And we have such small cubicles where lawyers stand outside and they are calling them only in turn when they have their cases to be heard. This shouldn't be. So to that extent, I believe that the Nigerian Bar Association actually should follow its own motto, which is the rule of law, and ensure that any organ that is championing the cause of that rule of law by ensuring independence and autonomy of the judiciary is supported. So to that extent, I think it's just a matter of implementation. The NBA has always been in support of efforts to guarantee independence for the judiciary. So the appeal of the NBA president is only for the timing, not that we do not support the strike at all.
Also wonders then, Mr. Ebola, why it has taken this long for the NBA to even say a thing. I mean, just as you heard, I mean, as you're well aware, there have been judgments before now. To compel, you have quoted at least two of them here today. And if you, just as you say, if this strike is in the interest of the Nigerian Bar Association, one would wonder why it would seem like the NBA has been quiet until now.
Well, you know that in order to avoid the pitfalls that we suffer in the hands of professional politicians in Nigeria, lawyers met and decided that we should limit the tenure of our president to 2 years. You know, and so to that extent, I think that issue of continuity, it has been a challenge for us in terms of enforcing the judgments in respect of judicial autonomy. So, you know, when the president comes into office, he has only 2 years, so he has to prioritize what probably will be his own goal in terms of achievement. But at the National Executive Council of the Nigerian Bar Association, which is a standing, the highest standing organ of the body, we've always taken the position that we support judicial independence and judicial autonomy. But to declare a strike is not within the power of lawyers generally, because we are not in control of the court system. So that's why we are supporting JUSUN, because they are the workers who can actually implement that strike. Lawyers are in private practice, so it is difficult to, for instance, enforce such strike, you know, across board. But a body like this, you know, being the ones directly in charge of implementing policies of the judiciary, are in the best position to do that, and we support them fully.
But Mr. Shumwale, now that we have this on our hands, you have said that there have been previous judgments, that you have gone on strike before, and this has not, you know, been done by the various governors. What's the assurance that this time around there will be a shift?
Well, we believe that 2014 is different from 2021. We also believe that this time around, even in the public view, everybody wants independence for judiciary. And that's why we are calling on all stakeholders, everybody, to rise up now and support Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria in achieving this feat. Once the judiciary is free,
yes, just a quick one.
Everybody can come to the court and get judgment.
Just a quick one, Mr. Shumwale, before you go.
What is different now? Let me say this.
Just a quick one. Have there been any conversation with any governor Have you had any interface with any governor to the effect that you want this action taken by them?
Right now, we've not had any discussion with any government agency. In fact, we are not even allowed to have any discussion with any government agency except with our national. It is only the national body that has a mandate to speak with any governor over this strike. My instruction is to close the gate and wait for further directive.
All right, then, what a time to close the gate. Well, we do thank you for your time this morning, Mr. Kehinde Shobowale, Chairman, Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, Lagos Branch. But we will be back in a moment. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Just one more thing on this judiciary workers' strike, Mr. Adegborowa. Does that then mean that the decision to limit the tenure of the NBA presidency to 2 years, given that they had to prioritize and as such have not been able to make this one the main issue for some time, is that decision hurting the NBA in that regard?
No, not necessarily. It's helped us to achieve smooth succession in terms of the rancor we normally witness during our elections, because our organization is zoned into north, south, west. And so we produce leaders in that order. And it's always a tenured election of just 2 years. So you don't dream of second tenure and then the normal problems of continuity, trying to force yourself to be in office forever. And that has helped us indeed. But I just wanted to make a point that the issue of autonomy for the judiciary has been achieved by some states. I'm aware that Bayelsa State, Delta State, and probably some other states have passed their own local laws within their own state, authorizing that money be paid directly to the purse of the judiciary of those states. And I think I also need to advise Jusun, if I can, that you should take this strike holistically, so that you don't achieve autonomy for the judiciary and then you come back to face the issue of corruption within the system. We come back to face the issue of lack of infrastructure, which is hindering effective administration of justice. Yeah. Judges writing in long hands, the infrastructure is poor, there's no power supply. So Jusun should just take it holistically so that when money is eventually released, they can monitor the money and police it and ensure that it's used for the right purpose and it's not subject to the normal Nigerian problems.
All right, so let's move on to the NSAS panel. So could you give us, what is the progress report? Because there's been several inquiries about, okay, now that compensations are going on in different parts of the country, what becomes of the ultimate recommendation? Will the federal government have to set up another panel to look into all of those things? Will they address any issues? Are the issues been so many? So just start from that. What is going on at the moment? Any progress being made?
Oh, yes. Thank you. I must tell you that a lot of work is going on within the panel in terms of hearing the petitions. If you look at the history of the panel, its establishment is a product of the 5-for-5 demand of the NSAS protesters. And we came into being sometimes in October, and by 20th of this month, it will be 6 months, we had about 230 petitions as of December. And by now, we have heard over 70 of those petitions. Some of them concluded, judgments delivered, and compensation awarded. The unique thing about the judicial panel on NSAS is that you don't get judgment and then it becomes empty. Once we have found that there is human rights abuse that is worthy of compensation, the fund is available already for us to issue check immediately and pay. So there's no process of appeal, there's no process of going to file application for execution of judgment. And so far, I believe that, a lot has been achieved, by giving people opportunity to pour out their mind, even though we didn't know the depth of the kind of problems citizens were facing in the hands of law enforcement agencies. But when we listen to these stories, people who were executed, people who have been maimed, people who have been denied of their rights or subject to torture or abuses. It's quite very mind-boggling. But I believe that so far, we have been able to address substantially the grievances of some of the petitioners that we have listened to.
If I could just jump in there before you go further. But we have equally heard some persons who have said, well, yes, some compensation has been given them, but they just felt it wasn't commensurate with what they have gone through.
Well, Chimale, I don't think, honestly, that any amount of money can compensate torture or deprivation. I mean, if you use myself as an example, I mean, in the period of Abacha's reign in this country, when we were arrested from November 1996 and kept in underground cell till July 1997. So what do you pay me to compensate for asking me to be looking at the sun every day or torturing or denying us access? So what we do is important for us to, first of all, listen to people. Let them pour out their heart. Let there be a healing process. And then be able to get the respondents, especially the police and those other security agencies, to come to defend or even listen, to the complaints of people, so that in that course, there will be a need for us to avoid a repeat of those kind of experience. So it's not just a matter of paying monetary compensation. It's to listen to people, to pour out their hearts, and then make recommendations to government that will enable the institutions concerned to make amends in that regard. And I must tell you, presently, we are about to enjoy a 3 months extension in terms of tenure. But if you look at the regular courts in Lagos State, it takes average 4 years or more for you to conclude the case to hearing, to judgment. But we have been able to reduce that and ensure that we take away all technicalities and allow people. So I think that even 1 year may be insufficient to address over 230 petitions. And people sitting every day, especially the chairperson, Honorable Justice Doris Okuobi, at her age, coming from the mainland and sitting every day, listening to petitions, listening to witnesses, lawyers. I must say it's been quite a wonderful experience. And I commend the government for setting up the panel. And I can assure you that we have total independence. Nobody, for instance, will be able to think that I will listen to any advice or control. So we meet and decide cases, on our own terms, based on our conviction, based on what we see and hear from the witnesses. And it's quite a very wonderful experience. But the other thing I would like to say is that we can't conclude, especially in respect of Lekki matters, whether death occurred or death didn't occur. The investigation is ongoing. We are listening to doctors. We are listening to complainants. We are listening to respondents. We are listening to the army. So until we come to a period when we have concluded the hearings, and then we assess them, and then be able to make up our mind whether indeed it is the case or it's not the case. So I say that, and I say this with respect to the report of the American U.S. Embassy in terms of the human rights report on Nigeria. I think it's too early to conclude whether there was anything at Lekki Toll Gate or not, until we have been able to exhaust our hearing and listen to all the witnesses before we come to a conclusion.
I will shed more light on that report in a moment, but it's interesting to see that this issue of autonomy follows the judiciary almost everywhere. Even with the panel, there's questions about autonomy because, the panel is basically funded by the state. The monies was given out, was allocated by the state. So I think it might be also good to further shed more light on that and just how that is not going to be a hindrance in dispensing justice on this panel, because that has been a major topic.
I think the panel could be used as a model for the independence of the judiciary that we talk about. Because before we commenced, I in particular, with other members, especially our chairperson, insisted that we wanted an independent secretariat, that we will be in charge and in control of. We wanted an account, that the money meant for the running of the panel and other issues are not subject to further approval. And we got that. Even though some of us are working there pro bono and without payment, but I ensured with the cooperation of the chairperson and other distinguished members of the panel that the funding for the panel had been available ahead of inauguration. And so we didn't agree to sit until those issues were sorted out. And I can assure you today, as I see it, the panel is totally independent, both financially and in terms of administrative structure.
When you talk about using the panel as a model, the question that comes to my mind as well, the panel is not handling political cases. So to what extent can we use the panel as a model in that regard?
No, what I mean by model is, for instance, when you come to a conclusion as a judge that something is wrong and you issue out a judgment, that judgment should not just be on paper. It should translate into something beneficial to the person who has approached the court for redress. And that's what we do in the panel, to say, once we convince ourselves that there is a particular grievance that needs to be remedied, we go ahead and issue a check for that and pay immediately. So we must get the National Assembly to ensure that the judgment enforcement procedure rules, which is an inheritance from the colonialists, is amended in such a way that judgments that have been delivered by the regular courts can be implemented immediately. So you don't need to subject it to the approval of the executive through the Attorney General before you get your money, for instance. Those are things that we don't face in the panel.
If you could just also clear this one, because we've seen a trend. Policemen whose names have been mentioned in cases fail to appear time and again. And for some, they wonder if that might hamper the outcome of this panel. So in that regard, having seen the trend, and it would seem that this trend might continue up until the termination of the panels across the state, will that in any way affect the outcome?
I think there's not been proper reporting of events going on at the panel. Without wanting to mention specific petitions which are still pending, I must, with all due respect, commend the Nigerian police in particular, because the police assigned 4 lawyers to the panel who attend the panel faithfully and regularly. And once the panel issues out summons to particular policemen, they always appear. I have sat in the panel and listened to not less than 5 different police officers who have been summoned by the panel to come and defend certain allegations, and they have been there. So it's for us to make up our mind whether we believe them or we don't believe, but it's not correct that policemen who have been summoned have not been coming. In fact, we have enjoyed tremendous cooperation from the police in that regard, in terms of obeying the directives of the panel. I just don't want to go into details, but by the time you get our final report, we have cases in which, even without taking a decision, the police had gone ahead to remedy situations and given benefit back to complainants who appear before the panel. So I think that in that regard, I must commend the Nigerian police force.
Well, the question specifically is, in cases where the policemen don't appear, does that in any way affect the outcome? Will that in any way affect the outcome of that particular case? Now, the specific cases where the policemen don't attend.
Well, if there is any case where we summon a policeman and they do not appear, it does not affect our work at all. What we do is to listen to the complainants, listen to their witnesses. If, according to our law in Nigeria, an allegation is made, we give you opportunity to come and defend it. Once the opportunity is offered and you decline or you don't take advantage of it, we will go ahead to do the needful if we believe the story of the petitioner or the complainant and give our verdict as the case may be. So the absence of the police, the army, or any other security agency does not in any way hamper the work of the panel or in terms of taking any decision in that regard at all, sir.
One of the things that's raised this issue of judicial panels all over the nation is, at the core of it, is human rights. And one wonders, with that report of the U.S. Department of State that you referenced, one wonders if indeed, I'm pretty sure you have seen the report, what you make of it. That report juxtaposed with the true position of human rights in the country. What do you make of it?
Honestly, the American report on the state of human rights in Nigeria, you say, is an understatement. In terms of general abuse of the rights of the people, you just go around the entire country and do a spot check on places of detention, police stations, or even the prisons, and find the number of people who are in custody, and are not being allowed to exercise their fundamental rights. So in that regard, I believe that it's not unique to this particular regime. Over the years, Nigerian government has been guilty of consistently denying the citizens their right of access to justice, right to freedom of movement, right to liberty. And so it's not just in year 2020 alone. I mean, look at the Amnesty report, for instance, where we're told that since the Boko Haram or the insurgency started in Nigeria, extrajudicial killing has been going on. You know, apart from the one being committed by the insurgents, the state agencies go ahead to execute people without an order of court. So in that regard, I do not fault the report of the American government in terms of violations of the rights of the people. My concern was just the isolated issue of what happened at the Lekki toll gate on October 20.
Well, still talking about the human rights thing, and you have underscored something critical in that it is not new, it's not peculiar to one particular government. It's something that's been happening for many, many years. You referenced your own experience as well. But we have spent 21 years in a democracy. What is hindering us or holding us back from doing the needful? You talk about a system. We've had quite a few governments within these past 21 years. So what is the problem with us getting the human rights end right?
Well, thank you very much. I think I can just answer this to say that part of the struggle for true federalism, for democracy and the rule of law in Nigeria is to ensure that the system that produces our leaders becomes transparent and can become something that will encourage genuine patriots to participate. Because look at my friend Mr. Yinka Odumakin. Look at my friend Innocent Chukuma. Look at my friend Bamidele Aturu, Imai Zazu. I think that the people who find themselves in government eventually do not know the history of where democracy comes from. So they are not able to appreciate the kind of struggle that people have put in to get to where we are. And so when they get there, they just see it as just leadership and opportunity to enrich themselves. And in that regard, they forget the basic tenets of democracy, which is good governance, which is respect for the rights of the people. So until we get our system so elevated to the level that honest and genuine patriots can aspire to positions of leadership, if we keep reproducing this set of leaders who will hand over to their children over the years, we will keep experiencing this thing almost till eternity. And that's the reason why it's painful that those who actually struggled and paid the price for democracy are not the ones in government. That is the gap that is leading to all the confusion that we
But doesn't that
have
put
in the system.
a question mark on our systems generally, Mr. Ebonlu-Adegboruwa? Because, I mean, it's not the politicians that execute these things. It's the people who are working with governments, the civil servants and the rest of them, who are supposed to have a system of continuity, whichever person is elected into power.
Well, I mean, you can just, let's take two examples. There are two dominant political parties, All Progressive Congress, People's Democratic Party. If you check the history of litigation in Nigeria, in the past 4 years, we've recorded over 1,000 cases in terms of internal democracy of the parties themselves. How leaders impose, how leaders name themselves as godfathers. So until we get back to that same struggle whereby, as is happening in the political parties, we can dismantle this culture of godfatherism, of imposition. You can't just get anything done. It will just be, in 2023, we will still be singing the same songs, manipulation of results, and that takes us to the basic struggle of restructuring. Unless you dismantle this constitution, unless you take away all those sections that do not allow true federalism, we'll just be singing the same old songs every year. Unfortunately, though.
Okay. I mean, the dismantling of a constitution must have, pushed the message home for a lot of people. But, for that report that was released by the U.S. Department of State, a lot of conclusions were drawn by different people. In fact, you had those celebrating it as a final verdict on what exactly played out at the Lekki toll gate. But going through that report, really, did it make any conclusion? Because all it said was, as though it was reporting all that had happened. So was there really any conclusion in that report?
No. As a matter of fact, first of all, is to note the limited scope of that report. It's for the year 2020. So probably must have ended in December. As of January 2021, the judicial panel is still taking testimonies from people who claim to be victims. We are still taking testimonies from doctors who claim to treat people. So if at all America wants to make any reference to what happened at the Lekki Toll Gate, it necessarily has to wait for the outcome of all these testimonies, all these evidences, for the panel to come out with a determination one way or the other. So in that regard, specifically, I think there was no conclusion in that report, and there couldn't have been any conclusion on it, because what the American government could have based its conclusion upon are all materials that are still before the panel. We empaneled an expert, they submitted reports. Those reports are still pending. We have not taken a decision. We have not even presented the expert report on the Lekki incident because the CCTV was given to us. We played it. We gave it to our expert. And we are waiting that these experts will come before us and testify and be cross-examined before we then take a decision. Which is why I explained, for instance, that even in 1 year, it may be difficult to conclude that assignment. But we are determined to come to a conclusion as much as we can, in respect of Lekki Toll Gate in particular.
Which takes me to my next question. Would you be pushing for an elongation? Yes, it's been extended by 3 months, but if 1 year, 70 cases out of 230, I imagine how much time that the panel has. So is that something in the thinking of the panel, possibly further elongation of the tenure of the panel?
I believe that what we do is to assess the nature of work done, at a particular time, and maybe when we get towards the end of the extended 3 months, we'll be able to determine how far we have gone. Like I told you, we had 230 petitions. I don't imagine ever that a single petitioner will be denied the opportunity of hearing, but just because there is no time. So I think we still have the opportunity to interact with the government of Lagos State. If it becomes clear that we have not been able to exhaust even half of the timetable of the panel, surely we're not on the altar of expediency or time, then denying Nigerians. Otherwise, the purpose of the panel will have been defeated if a single petitioner is not heard at all. So if we get to that stage in the next 3 months and we're unable to conclude, surely, there will be need for elongation, but with all due respect.
Well, at the end of the panel sitting, what is expected to happen both at the state and at the federal level?
Well, as you can see from what we have done so far, there are remedies that are immediate. That is, if we find that maybe somebody has been killed extrajudicially without any explanation or without lawful excuse, and we have come to a verdict that it was wrong, we give a particular amount in terms of financial compensation, even though it could not bring back that life. We've given 10 million, we've given even more than that. So that already is achieved. The second thing is we then make recommendations on the handling of weapons and firearms. We then make recommendations for training for police and security officers. We make recommendations in terms of the need for education in the knowledge of basic human rights of the citizens for the law enforcement agencies. Because you will discover that even the police officers themselves may not be aware that you are not supposed to beat a suspect. You are not supposed to torture them. You're not supposed to compel a suspect to write a statement if he insists that his lawyer should be there. So education is important, and those are part of our recommendations, that we give at the end of every verdict. So when we conclude, we then summarize them and pass it to the state government to be passed to the federal government for implementation. In Abuja, for instance, the National Human Rights have been able to collate its own petitions and come to a conclusion which has passed to the National Assembly. You remember that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, said that he was not going to sign the 2020 appropriation if there was no provision made for compensation for victims of police and other security abuses. So I believe that at the end of the case, in all the states and even at the National Human Rights, people will have cause to smile with all due respect.
Because, while the panel sitting goes on, just as you referenced in passing, daily, on a regular basis, in fact, on the street, you still see citizens who are still being harassed by security agencies who perhaps oblivious of the essence of the panel itself. So to some extent, it just suggests as though, well, the panel can have their sitting, NSAS is over. It's back to business. So is this recommendation, are you optimistic that at the end of the day, what you mentioned being ingrained in some security agencies in terms of how they handle citizens, us and them scenario, will become history or will be addressed?
Thank you. I generally believe that cases of human rights abuses by security agencies is not limited to physical contact in terms of arrest, in terms of beating, torture, even assigning policemen to take over another person's land by force, assigning policemen to help you eject a tenant against the normal procedure of law. The abuses come in various grades. And that, it goes beyond the work of the panel, with all due respect to you, Chamberlain. Reforming the police, reforming the security agencies is something that is deep-rooted. It's something that the National Assembly has to be involved, the stakeholders, at our own level at the panel. We can best do these recommendations to ensure that we minimize, the occurrences of these abuses by making recommendations for education, for reform, for funding. But in terms of the daily occurrences, I do not want to deceive myself to say they will cease immediately. It will probably take time for these things to come to pass.
Well, who knows? Does that suggest it may take another kind of protest? Or maybe the system may just think, let's implement some of these recommendations. Is that what you think?
I think the police itself and the other security agencies have learned some lessons from the NSAS protests in terms of the power of the people. Because it got to a state when nobody was in control. Yeah. And we don't want to see that again. And so it behoves on the police to embark upon self-examination and be able to extend some kind of self-restraint in terms of the exercise of force on the citizens of Nigeria. The word Nigeria Police Force, as inherited from the colonialists, should no longer be the mentality of the regular police, whereby you just use your uniform or your weapon to get what you want at the expense of the rights of the citizens. It will take some time, but I believe gradually we will get there.
All right, a good place to leave it on that optimistic note. Mr. Ebunlu Adegborowa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
We're back in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Well, now we're talking health matters, and Dr. Tajuddin Sanusi, the Registrar of Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, joins us next. Good morning, and thank you for coming on today on the program. Well, yes, indeed, a lot going on in the health sector, particularly as it has to do with doctors. The NARD are on strike at the moment, and they listed several demands, part of which does concern your office. And in fact, let's let you listen to what the NARD president did say when he was on the program last time out.
The MDCN registrar, Dr. Sanusi, is brought to book. Then I think this process would have been all good without going on a strike. I'll tell you why. You can't, because of some laws, say you are going to adhere to quota system. You are giving a teaching hospital like FITA 12 house officers when they have more than 1,000 beds. You are giving a place like UCH like 24 house officers. There should be consequences. That's why as NAD we're asking for his resignation, or he should be sacked. Because you cannot allow house officers of 2,136 to be on the street demonstrating because of his failure. It's an irresponsible thing. In good places, you resign honorably. House officers in tertiary hospitals. Or let me go back. There's a central polling system. The central polling system is supposed to be like the NYC when you pass and you are pulled into the system. One system failure. Now, we are saying we are doing a central polling system when you are only accommodating those in federal. What about those in state? You are doing a process, pull all together. Get all house officers that are supposed to go for their internship and distribute them to different places. When you have stopped reaccrediting hospitals and you are still living in the euphoria of the accreditation you did 10 years back, and now you tell them that they cannot get more house officers because there's a quota system, and you insist on it, and you call the doctor, Dr. Sanusi, the registrar of MDCN, to order, he doesn't even pick your call.
What do you think about that, sir?
Thank you very much for inviting me for this program. First and foremost, I think the NARD president is ill-informed about the statutory functions of council. Number one, in 2017, when the Federal Executive Council approved the centralization of housemanship program in Nigeria, every institution was collated or supposed to be involved, be it federal, state, or private. This was not to be because of the paucity of funds. In 2020, in fact, at a point, we thought this thing was not going to take off again. We were actually informed that it's in the budget of 2021. Let me take you back a bit. In 2018, we wrote to all the training institutions that they should revalidate their accreditation status, meaning that if you have 10 and you want to have more than 10, let us carry out the accreditation exercise. As at December 2020, only 4 of them responded. And if MDCN were to have actually wielded its statutory powers, then quite a lot of them will not be able to actually employ house officers. And we should all know that it's because we have problems. That is why the federal government thought it fit to centralize the old system. Before then, we'll be inundated with requests for placement, this and that. We were asked to bring our documents, figures, statistics. Any university graduating doctors in this country will normally grant license to those doctors. And from our record, nobody should be roaming about the streets. Then where did the problem actually come from? That is the question people need to ask, and they are not even asking that question. Yes, the quota we have, which the teaching hospitals have refused to revalidate, whether to get it upward reviewed or downward reviewed, is what we submitted to the budget office, and that was what was used to actually prepare the budget. So that's why I said the NARD president is ill-informed. And on the issue of calling me not picking calls, number one, I don't have his number. I don't have his name. I don't know him because by virtue of my position, I deal with registered practitioners in terms of licensing and what have you. So I don't deal with associations. Now coming on air, saying I am irresponsible. In fact, our profession is like a paramilitary. Seniority is there. Respect is there. It is highly unethical for a very junior person to be coming and disparaging a very senior person on air like this, irrespective of your position. And here is somebody who had not made any move to actually come to our office or get across to our office. Even if you cannot get me, I'm not the only person. I have deputy registrars, I have assistant registrars there. He will inform you of what is happening. So that is what I have to say for now. Maybe you have other questions to ask.
Well, he also did actually say that the Chairman House Committee on Health did try to reach you, and you didn't respond to his calls either. Was that right?
Excuse me, sir. Yes, at times when I have other responsibilities, phones, like I'm here now, anybody trying to get me cannot get me because I have to put off my phones. So the same person, when the phone was on, he called me and I picked his phone and I picked his call. So I don't know why people continue to complain.
You definitely seem like a
Because
very...
I'm not the only person working there.
Right.
I'm the registrar. I have deputy registrar. I have assistant registrars.
Right.
If you don't get the registrar, try the deputy registrar. You didn't get it. You didn't try. You didn't tell anybody. You come to the air and say you call the registrar. He's not picking your call.
Well, Dr. Sanusi,
I think that statement is unfair to me.
when you said that by the virtue of your position, you don't deal with associations, are you saying you don't recognize the NARD?
I'm not saying I don't recognize NARD. I'm not saying I don't recognize it because statutorily, we have nothing to do with NARD directly. Because usually NMA is on the board of council. So if there are issues, because NARD is an affiliate of NMA, and the NMA can actually come. However, nothing stops the NARD from coming to us. Come on, MDCN, these are the things we have noticed. How are we going to solve these problems? Rather, going on air and disparaging somebody, I think it's most unfair to me.
Is it just the NARD president? Because the impression they give is that before they embark on any such decision, the neck of the association meets, and then they aggregate the position of resident doctors. And the residency program is, I believe, is significant in that health sector. So could he, if by extension, meaning that the NARD itself, the resident doctors, don't understand the program itself, doesn't that then say that there's a huge communication challenge about perhaps MDCN communicating the policy to resident doctors?
Like I said, NMA is aware of all these programs. NARD is an affiliate of NMA. And I expect that if they approach NMA and they cannot even get NMA, nothing stops them from approaching MDCN, which they did not do. That is just it. And everything is already, in fact, when you look at their demand, the house officer's salary is just the minute thing. And that is where MDCN is concerned. And if you allow me to go a bit further about this house officer's salaries, in December, we met with the leadership of the committee of CMDs and MDs, and with my management. And I appealed to them. I said, let us manage this period of transition together to the exclusion of nobody. We are expecting that within 2 weeks or 4 weeks, everything will have been sorted out. Forward the names of house officers that are not likely to finish their internship by 31st December 2020, using the quota allotted to you. Then the SS1 you think you have, make a separate list. We will go to the budget office and see how that one also can be sorted out. Then, by 18th of January, only 7 out of 42 institutions had responded positively. We now have to write a reminder. By 1st week of February, 12 more people responded. 12 more institutions responded to our call, making 19. And we forwarded the 19 to the Office of Accountant General for payment. Our own is just a clearing house. The fund is not even with the MDCN. Our own is to profile. And in the process, we discovered that some people's name appear in 2 or 3 institutions. We discovered that some people are not yet licensed to practice, they are already there. We discovered again that some people have already done housemanship, their names are there. So all these things are there. And all this is just for us to actually sanitize the system and possibly eliminate quackery. I give you an instance. A tertiary institution engaged a house officer a couple of years ago, so to say, only to discover that that person is a quack. You see, there are many issues attached to this centralization of everything. Our own is just a clearing house. We are not the one paying. It's the Office of Accountant General is paying their salaries. Our own is to authenticate and then forward the list to the Office of Accountant General.
Comments that you have made, especially about the CMDs and MDs and the NMA, suggest that perhaps the conversations or the communication that should be going to the resident doctors is not reaching them. If you, as you said, have no direct relationship with NARD, it would suggest that the communication intended for the resident doctors from your office does not get to them. Because if NMA is represented on the board, as you said, and you have conversations with CMDs and MDs, it would suggest for this situation to have degenerated as it has, it would suggest that those communication is not getting across to them. What do you think of that?
Well, to me, I'm not a CMD. The resident doctors are directly under the purview of the CMDs and MDs in different locations, and we had discussions with them. It is their responsibility to disseminate this information downward to people that are supposed to have this information.
It then suggests,
body.
yeah, doesn't it then suggest that the CMDs may have either misrepresented or inadequately represented the MDCN to the resident doctors, for which reason the MDCN, the NARD is calling out the MDCN?
He said, I was not there when they were meeting the resident doctors. I wouldn't know what transpired between the MDs and the resident doctors. We were not called, so I wouldn't know what happened in my absence or in the absence of MDCN.
Okay, this
because
is
the resident doctors are directly working at the teaching hospitals where these CMDs and MDs superintend. MDCN is not superintending over any teaching hospital in this country. No.
Now, the position of the NARD is clear from their demands that you have seen as well. The question then is, what would you be telling them now in order to at least resolve this stalemate, which is definitely affecting many, many lives as we speak?
Thank you very much, sir. From our own end, we have resolved the issue. People are now paid. We've presented, in fact, on Friday, public holiday, my staff were in the office, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So this thing has been resolved. We forwarded the names to the Office of Accountant General. As at yesterday, I think they started receiving their alert, the House officers. That is the only issue that concerns MDCN.
So are you saying that when the NEC of the NARD said that members have been made to pass through agony for 3 months without salaries despite uninterrupted service delivery to the nation, is that the salary that you say has been paid?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just to get clarification, you mentioned... please go ahead. You can land on that.
Okay. You see, one thing people need to realize is this, or know, we advise the CMDs and MDs to stop recruitment in December. Let us mind this period of transition so that within 2 to 4 weeks, you have sorted this issue out of people whose program is overlapping to 2021. But instead, they started recruiting more people to come into the system and now telling us we are not paying them. No, they are not being fair to MDCN.
Okay, just to be clear.
Our own is a clearing house, actually.
Right, just to be clear, you mentioned the central placement. Right, pardon me. You mentioned the central placement system. It was approved by FEC in 2017. But did you say that it didn't take off until it was appropriated for in 2021? Did I hear you right?
Yes, that is it.
So between 2017, when it was approved, it never took off up until now?
No, sir.
If you could tell us, what was responsible for that? Because for a lot of people, it was done and dusted in 2017.
I don't know. I don't know. Year in, year out, we have always made provision for it, but somewhere along the line, it will not reflect. So it still went back to where it was, in the teaching hospitals.
Now, speaking of these teaching hospitals, you said that at first only 7 responded, then 12 responded. That's a total of 19 out of 42, which means that 23 institutions have not responded any whatsoever to your demands for accreditation or for an upgrade.
As at February, first week of February.
Okay, so how many have responded now?
That was
and how many are outstanding?
They've all responded now.
Right, because, I mean, it begs the question, are you planning now to give them accreditation to increase the number of resident doctors, or at least doctors that they can take in? Because you said that some of them have excesses. How do they have excesses if they've not gotten accreditation to employ more?
Thank you very much. You see, that is the question I expect people to ask. If you have been over-employing over the years, therefore, nobody should be roaming about the street. People are not asking that question. Be that as it may, MDCN is ready for reaccreditation once they apply. They have to apply. We can't just bump on them. They have to reapply.
If I could just try to smoothen the feathers, are you saying now from now, when you see the call of the NARD president, you're going to respond, or at least even pick up a call to tell him that, well, this is what's happening and these are the areas that we're sorting it out? Is that what we're expecting from now?
We have sorted the issue of salaries. The remaining issue now is the reaccreditation for them to have appropriate number that will match the material and human resources available in those teaching hospitals and paramedical centers.
If there's corruption in the recruitment system, is this being addressed? Or who's supposed to address it?
Thank you very much, sir. You see, we are just starting. We are not pleasing, or we are not alleging there is corruption. But the thing, we have not recruited. What we did was we already have a software which was released just last week, so people can now apply online. Nobody is posting anybody anywhere. You choose 3 hospitals across the country. If there are no vacancies in any of those hospitals, the system will prompt up hospitals throughout the country where there are vacancies for you to pick one. So the issue of somebody posting somebody to anywhere is not there. No preferential treatment, no preferential posting, no.
Does quota system come in there?
The portal is live now. But
how does quota system come in? Because you spoke a lot about the quota system.
They applied for accreditation and the quota was allotted based on available material and human resources as at the time they applied. And like I did mention, I said in 2018, we wrote to all the teaching hospitals and the federal medical centers to revalidate their accreditation status. As at December 2020, only 4 of them responded. And we have since carried out the accreditation exercise for those ones.
Well, as the regulator for the health sector, if I could just bring this on in as well, there are several questions about upholding the ethics of the profession, which MDCN is supposed to ensure that they adhere to. And many, over time, even at least now that the board has been reconstituted, they keep saying that the MDCN has got to be up and doing in that regard. You've heard a lot about that. What is your council doing about that?
Thank you very much, sir. At the moment, our medical and dental practitioner disciplinary tribunal is on, started yesterday. You see, the disciplinary organs of council are there. We have the medical and dental practitioner investigating panel, we call it IP. That is a body that is saddled with the responsibility of actually investigating or carrying out preliminary investigation into alleged professional misconduct. After the investigation, if the doctor has no case to answer, the matter ends there. However, if the doctor has a case to answer, meaning a prima facie case has been established against that doctor, then the matter is transmitted to the medical and dental practitioners disciplinary tribunal. In exceptional cases where that doctor is found to constitute danger to public health, that doctor is suspended immediately. And once the doctor is suspended immediately, then we have to facilitate the trial within 3 months. So, since council has been reconstituted, the tribunal has been meeting regularly. This week, we started the tribunal sitting yesterday, and to run till Friday. And we have over 70 cases pending for trial, while we have over 120 cases still being investigated. The public are actually responding, and they are reporting this to our colleagues for one form of alleged professional misconduct or the other. I can tell you that in that respect, MDCN is very, very alive and up to the task.
Let me quickly ask you this. You also regulate the practice of alternative medicine in Nigeria. It will seem like we aren't even hearing their voices at all.
Thank you very much. You see, alternative medicine in Nigeria is under the purview of Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria. I can tell you authoritatively that we have less than 40 of them registered by council. Most of the people you see on the street, they are charlatans. But the thing is, if there are no complaints, there's nothing we can do, especially for those who are not registered by us. It's a matter for the police to handle. When a quack is arrested, where our own is just to come in as a prosecution witness. Is this person a registered person or not? If it's a registered person, fine. If it's not, it's a matter for the police. When the thing gets to court, we'll say it again. Actually, they still use our law to actually try them, but it's not MDCN that tries those people.
I expect that you'll be at the forefront
those who are not on our register.
I understand. I mean, I expect that you'll be at the forefront of rounding off some of those people, because NAFDAC, for example, you see them carrying out sting operations, going around to ensure that, people abide by the tenet. So why aren't you at that forefront? Because if we wait for someone to report, we'll probably never get anywhere.
Sir, the directors of medical services in each of the states of the Federation are all members of Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria. And they are in charge of facilities in their various states. And they are like the eyes and ears of MDCN in their state. If they bring some of these things to our attention, we move in there. Of course, even if those people are caught, they are handed over to the police. Once they are with the police, we are handicapped. There's nothing we can do. It's a matter for the law enforcement agency to deal with. We are not the one going to charge them to court. It's the police.
Just one more thing. This is a tweet from one of our viewers, and he's a doctor, apparently, saying that the salary paid to house officers is short of the original amounts. There you see Dr. Delahart right there responding to the question we asked about salaries being paid. So how come the salary paid is short of the original amount?
MDCN is not in charge of salary. It's the IPs that pay the salary. So there is nothing I can say about the salary. Like I said, the fund is not with the MDCN. And you see, house officers are on comments 1. So when the comments 1 is, everything is tabulated with the IPs there. We are not the one paying. Our own is to profile, certify that this person is a house officer, is good to go, and will forward the names, and that's all. For the payment of the salaries, whatever they get is IPs.
I think that your duty as well is to ensure that doctors who have completed their postings, their names are not on those lists, continuing to receive salaries.
Yes.
So, if you said that there are irregularities, does that mean that you've not been doing your job?
I don't understand what I mean. Can you please come again, please?
If you say that there are irregularities in the registers and that still exists, does that, if you say the box stops at your table, it means that somebody's not been doing his job?
Excuse me, sir, get me clearly. When the names come to MDCN, what we do is to go to our record. Is this person supposed to be a house officer? If he's supposed to be a house officer, that's first step. There are some of them who have done house job and they are already on full registration. How come they go back and start house job again? It's a question that needs to be answered by people that engage them as house officers. Okay. So that's what we do. Like I said, in the list brought, some of them, we have their names appearing in 3 different hospitals. So as a regulator and as the head of the regulatory body, I have a responsibility to make sure that nobody's name is duplicated. I make sure that nobody whose name is not supposed to be there is there. So that's what we do.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time because we're getting a lot of comments as to hospitals, doctors, nurses who don't treat patients right, and they say MDCN, they can't reach your office. But I guess we'll have to see if we could forward those questions or comments to you so you can direct the people. What do they do? How do they get across MDCN to correct these ills? Because there's so many of them, but we do have to go. But we'll get across to you such that you can let the people know what they need to do in those cases. But we do thank you for your time this morning, Dr. Tajuddin Sanusi, Registrar, Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria.
For having me on this program and allowing MDCN to air its own view to the public. Once again, I say thank you very much.
Thank you too. Well, we will see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
I'm Kayode Kikiolu.
And I'm Ayo Makide. Have a wonderful day.